All right, I am so excited about this special guest on today's episode of the Caroline Gleich Show. I'm speaking with Tracee Metcalfe. She's a renowned physician, climber, and this fall became the first American woman to climb and summit all 14 8,000-meter peaks, the world's highest. I was following your journey, and yeah, I'm just so excited to chat with you about your amazing accomplishment. How's it going today?
It's going really good. I'm honestly super excited. I was really honored that you asked me to talk to you, and I've been really inspired by the work that you've been doing this last year. And yeah, I'm excited to be here. It's going well today.
That's awesome. Tell me a little bit about your background. Where I know you live right now in Vail, and but where did you grow up? Where are you from originally?
Yeah, I grew up in Southern California, in the San Fernando Valley, which is, yeah, like kind of a suburb of Los Angeles. So not in the mountains at all. And then moved out to Colorado when I graduated from high school. I actually was supposed to go to UCLA for college, but I wasn't going to start until January. So I thought I'm going to move out to Colorado and see what the mountains are like and just, find whatever job I can. And when I got out to Colorado, I realized that I didn't want to go back to UCLA and ended up staying in Colorado. And yeah, so that was where I grew up.
Did you do sports or did you go visit the mountains as a child or how did you get into mountaineering?
Right. I didn't really do sports. I was more of a kind of a nerd and like really focused on school and getting good grades. And I did like drama club and things like that. But I did do like my dad, when my parents got divorced, my dad wanted us to find like an activity that we could do together. And so when I was like 12, he taught me how to ski and we started doing ski trips together, which was awesome. So that was like really my only exposure to the mountains was we would go to Park City kind of at least once a year and do a ski trip. And so, yeah, but I read about the mountains a lot. For some reason, it always interested me, even though I just didn't spend that much time in them.
So I can totally relate to that growing up as a nerdy Midwest kid that played musical instruments and studied languages. Those ski trips that I took with my family out west really captured my imagination from a young age. And yeah, I think for me, it was like just seeing the big mountains. I'm like, I want to go up there and climb them. But it took me a really long time to get into it. And so how did you then go from being that kid on the ski trip with your dad to getting into this more serious high altitude mountaineering?
Yeah, I would say pretty gradually. Like when I moved to Colorado, Colorado's known for having like 54, 14,000 foot peaks or 58, depending on how you do the list. And so it just seemed to me a natural way, like to do. I started with the easy 14,000 or 14,000 foot hikes, and kind of worked my way up over. I mean, it took me probably close to 20 years to do them all. It wasn't like I made it a mission to try to do them as quickly as I could. It was more a way to gradually expand my knowledge, like starting with hikes, picking ones that then went to scrambles, then picking ones that had fifth class climbing. And along the way, I met my ex-husband Tom, and we both loved the mountains, and we decided to go down to Peru to do some bigger mountains down there. I went to Rainier with Tom, and we climbed that, and that was like our first. When we went to Peru, we went on a guided trip, so we were sort of learning as we went, and then with Rainier, we just did that with some friends. So then we had to kind of up our like game of glacier travel. So I would say like it was a gradual process, like starting in the mountains of Colorado, going to Rainier, eventually up to Alaska. And I can talk more about that if you want. And then yeah, that was after Alaska. Then I was interested to go to the biggest mountains.
Yeah, no, I'd love to hear more about Alaska. And I think those kind of backyard or like lifelong projects too are so fun because they always just give you a reason to get out on the weekend or whenever you're looking for something to do. I think that's such a nice way to get into mountaineering is by starting with a project or maybe it wasn't even a project when you started the 14ers. But it's that's super cool. So yeah, I'd love to hear more about Alaska.
Yeah, sure. And I was gonna say, yeah, like I followed your climbing and skiing projects and doing the shooting gallery, and like I was inspired by that, and so it yeah that was to me more ambitious than what that because it required the skiing and the commitment, but I was really inspired by that. So
Well, thank you so much. It's like it's so fun when you have I was like with the way you described your progression with the Colorado 14ers really reminded me a lot of the shooting gallery project because I started with the ones that were actually like part of the ski resort because some of the shoots like are actually in bounds. And then that was sort of the gateway drug to getting what's around the next corner and then, building those skill sets. And for me, having that tick list was a way to build confidence and have a roadmap of what skills I needed to develop and where I needed to go. And I was never sure I would finish the project just because I want to maintain that humility in how I approach the mountains. And it was terrifying, honestly. And I was like, never sure I would be brave enough because I still really battle that imposter syndrome. But it's nice to have it's nice to have a checklist for sure.
totally, I agree. Yeah, you said that yeah that I totally agree. So. Yeah, so Alaska was kind of I had the opportunity to go heli skiing up in Valdez, and when I was up there, there was a woman, heli ski guide named Leanne, who was just a complete badass. She was also working on getting her pilot's license, and she said, like I can see that you really enjoy skiing, and you're a doctor, and my husband is a ranger on Denali. And I think you should try to work with him this summer. And I was like, wow, no, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I can, I've climbed Rainier. I don't know anything about Denali. And she kind of reassured me, that my role would be to be the medical person. And so I didn't need to have a ton of rope skills and that I would learn that up there. So that was it was intimidating at first, and my friends who know me at the time, I was training so hard. Once she told me about that, and I talked to her husband Tucker, and agreed to do a patrol on Denali. I was very focused on, being as physically fit as I could. Doing the rope skills as much as I could, like making sure I had the right medical skills. And when I had the opportunity to do that, I just loved it. So we were up there for a month. I had a great team. Like the two other volunteers on our team was a couple from Jackson Hole who are still my really good friends. Like they just came through and stayed with me this last weekend. And so it was a really great experience. And we had hard rescues, we had body recoveries, like the seriousness of the mountains. That was maybe the first time that I think that probably was now as I think back, like the first time I had seen somebody die in the mountains. And so it was a big reality check, but I also really liked it. And so I thought, I want to figure out. Well, I went back and went and worked on Denali the second next year again because I liked it so much. And then after I did that, I thought, there's other mountains, and Denali is kind of a big time commitment. It's kind of miserable. It's very cold. So at that point, I really wanted to figure out how to go to the Himalaya, and the only way I really knew how to do it was by being a doctor. And so I tried to apply to the Himalayan Rescue Association, which is a nonprofit that staffs the Everest ER and has other remote clinics. And they were basically they had like a couple year waiting list to be able to staff any of their facilities. So I was like, okay, that's great. Like put me on the waiting list, but I really want to do something now because I'm excited.
Hmm.
So my friend, one of my good friends, had worked for a company called Hemex, which is Russell Bryce. A big expedition company in Nepal. And she said, if you don't have to volunteer, like if you're okay with working for an expedition company, I bet you I could get you a job. I could get you an interview at least with Russell Bryce. And so it just all worked out really well. He happened to be in Vail for a ski trip, and I basically had like a 1 hour meeting with him, and he sort of said, "Well, if you're a good friend of Ellen, I trust her, and you've worked on Denali 2 different seasons, and he'd been on Denali, and so he said, it's a very serious mountain, and so I know that if you could be a doctor there, I'm sure you would be fine on Everest." And so then he gave me an opportunity to work with him. I had to work, I didn't have to. I got to work on Manaslu first, which is
Wow.
the eighth highest mountain in the world. And I did I worked as his expedition doctor on Manaslu twice. And then before I had an opportunity to go to, then I went to Makalu and then to Everest. So that was a little long-winded, but that's how I got started.
So are you a wilderness or what's your medical specialty as a physician?
Internal medicine. So,
Okay, internal
yeah,
medicine.
yeah.
Got it.
So not wilderness. I'm doing this diploma in mountain medicine program, which is a couple-year program, and I've just been sort of slow about it. But honestly, and I've taken in like advanced wilderness life support, and I stay up to date on that. But yeah, internal medicine. So that was a little intimidating to me that I wasn't an ER doc or one of the more traditional specialties. But I think so. When I went to Denali, I had that concern. I said, "Oh, I'm not an ER doctor," and what they said to me was, "You know what? The Rangers actually know how to be ER doctors. Like they have all that like wilderness first responder knowledge, and they're good at doing all that. What they need help with is if somebody's having chest pain, like to know." If you need to be afraid of the chest pain, or what else could be, is it heart? Is it lungs? And so, and I think that that is true. That you need to know that stuff, but I think having internal medicine, just having a kind of broader knowledge of everything, I also think can serve you well in
Absolutely.
wilderness setting.
And I bet you learned so much from those 2 months and seasons on Denali because I feel like mountain medicine too in the US and internationally is really evolving and there hasn't been a ton of good data and it's
Yep.
getting better, but I mean it's so hard to do studies or any real research at high altitude. So you probably learned a lot experientially. And so while you were on Denali, did you get to summit?
I did. So that's a great question. So the first year that I was there, we did get to Summit, which was amazing. I think it was June 11th. It was my mom's birthday, so that's how I can remember that one. And then the next year when I went back, the plan was to do a traverse to go to the Muldrow side, to start on the traditional side and then traverse over at the end of the season to the Muldrow side. And that didn't end up working out. So the second year I was there, we didn't summit and we didn't do the traverse. But the first year I was there, we got really lucky and we were able to summit, which was amazing.
Yeah, because it can be so challenging with weather, I know, on Denali. And yeah, that's super cool. And then when
You've been
you
there
were,
too, right?
I was there. Yeah, we tried to do a really fast ascent and we got shut down by some lenticulars around 14,000 feet. And then we had this upcoming Pakistan trip. And then we should have stayed really, but my partner's grandmother was having health issues and we just felt really called to go back home to spend some time with grandma before going to Pakistan. So it was a tough call because it was a great season on Denali and that mountain is so beautiful. I'd love to get back up there. But also, you probably learned a ton of great expedition skills and winter camping skills on Denali during those times that were probably so helpful for the Himalayas. And like, do you have any tips, I guess, for listeners that are doing expeditions or snow camping about staying comfortable at high altitude and in that element for so long?
Oh gosh, let me think about that.
We can
I
come
for
back to
sure
it
learned a
too.
lot on Denali. I would say it's a it's a balance, but having a warm enough sleeping bag, like to me, was critical. And I'm not. I know that means that you have to, right? You carry all your own stuff on Denali. And to me, having a warm sleeping bag and not shivering at night was really critical. I think it was there that I learned the trick of like making, getting hot water in your Nalgene bottle and then keeping the Nalgene bottle inside your sleeping bag, to warm your feet up at night. I learned just simple things like electronics freeze and that you need to keep all of your electronics in your sleeping bag. The importance of kind of having boots with removable liners so that you can take your liners and put them in your warm sleeping bag at night. Those are kind of the things that come to mind. I guess that was my first experience not showering for 30 days, like probably the longest 30 days.
30 days. That's amazing, Tracy. Oh wow. My longest is 16. That's incredible.
It was long. Denali is not that dirty though. When I would say back, like to me at the end, we were stinky and there was a lot of dead skin, but there's just not a lot of dirt on Denali. So it didn't, your hair's oily and it was gross, but it wasn't bad. But that was my first experience where I was like, okay, I can go 30 days without showering. It's not the end of the world. Like I don't love it, but I've done it and it's okay.
That's incredible. I feel like when I my first snow camping trip to Alaska, I figured out a way on a warm afternoon to take like a camelback and fill it with like medium warm water and wash my hair. But you have to have the right weather to do that. Like it's a
You have to
risky
have
move. You have to feel confident that you're gonna have like a warm enough afternoon to dry.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely. And I
you
will
don't
say, like,
yeah.
yeah, like, and I for sure now, because on expeditions like in Nepal, I always figure out a way to wash my hair now, but it's warmer there. So Denali, I just didn't do it. Lots of wet wipes to
Yeah, it's too cold. You will freeze your hair. You'll get like hair sickles.
exactly.
Um,
It doesn't break. So.
so then you worked when you were working as a doctor on Makalu, Manaslu, with Hymex. Did you get to summit those, or how long were those stints in the Himalayas? And what altitudes were you living at for those times?
Right. So on Manaslu, I actually worked as the expedition doctor, three different expeditions, and I
Wow.
never got to summit. The first time I wasn't trying to summit. I had just I had a hip replacement, and so I was still sort of healing from that, and I didn't know if I could summit an 8,000-meter peak because I had only done Denali, and so I was a little intimidated. But the second time I went back to Manaslu, I said, okay, if I'm going to come back. I want a chance to summit with the team. And Russell Bryce said, okay, that's fine. You can do that. But the next time we went back, it was a year that he ended up, nobody from our team summited. We just thought the conditions were too challenging up high. But I was living at 16,000 feet for about 6 weeks. And then the
Wow.
next time I went back, one of the climbers got high altitude pulmonary edema when we were up at Camp 3, and I went down with him because I was concerned about him. He ended up doing great, but he didn't summit. And there wasn't an opportunity to go back up and try another summit, but our team did summit that year. And then on Makalu, it was the year of 2015, which was the year of the big earthquake in Nepal. And
Oh,
so
wow.
that was its own situation. We were all safe there, but we didn't keep climbing once the earthquake happened. So the first
Yeah.
time I really had a chance to try to summit it was on Everest with Himex.
And were you able to summit that trip?
I was. So that was my first 8,000-meter summit was working as a doctor for Himex. And it was a really cool experience. I think, I'm not sure if Russell Bryce really thought that I would, go to the summit or if I would maybe like get to Camp 2 or Camp 3 and be like, okay, that's good enough. But I mean, at that point, I was very determined. I'd been, on Manaslu several times and on Makalu. And so there was no part of me the only way I wasn't going to summit was if, something outside of my control happened or someone on our team got sick and I needed to go down with them. So that was a great opportunity and experience.
I'm so amazed by like all of these stories, but especially your ability to live for 6 weeks above 16,000 feet and to be working in that environment because it does take a toll. I mean, you do kind of acclimatize, but it's harsh living at 16K or at even just above 14K. Like it's hard on the body, I think. So was that sort of the inspiration to do all the 8,000-meter peaks, or how did you kind of take that next step and get started with doing others?
No, after I did Everest, I really wanted to do Makalu because I'd been there, and the earthquake had happened, and so I felt like I had unfinished business where I wanted to go back to that mountain, and I thought it was really we had gotten as high as Camp 2, the year of the earthquake. So it was kind of like, okay, I want to do Makalu, but I wasn't thinking that I wanted to do all 14. And then after doing Makalu, I started to think like, well, maybe I want to do all the ones in Nepal. Like that would be a really cool project. And again, it wasn't like in any sort of hurry. It just seemed like, well, this makes sense. I can take time, I can stack my shifts at work and take time off and take my vacations to like go be either the expedition doctor or just climb. And I figured I would do like one a year and that my goal would be to try to do all the ones in Nepal. But to answer your question, when things really changed was after I did Annapurna. I didn't realize how challenging and objectively dangerous Annapurna was. And something just kind of changed after I did Annapurna, I thought like imposter syndrome was flaring, like I don't belong here, like all of those thoughts. And like I was in over my head. But then it didn't take that long where then I started to think, well, you know what? Like that's kind of the crux of like the ones in Nepal and you did it. So then it sort of gave me more confidence that I'd done one of the objectively more dangerous and harder ones. So at that point, I felt like I definitely want to do all the ones in Nepal, and then I decided, no, I really want to do them all.
I mean, I think you're such a great role model for people that want to get into mountaineering too. Like as a professional skier, but just as a person in the mountains, I've lost so many friends, and I see sometimes people like rushing things, like rushing their progression, and people that are really fit, sometimes their fitness is so great that they can get away with a lot of things. But I do think it takes a lot of years to develop that mountain sense, that intuitive dance we have with the mountain of like managing risk. And I love your example because like I love hearing about the process because I just think that's a great role model for how I'd love other people who are getting into this to approach the sport.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I agree that it's better to, right, just have kind of a natural progression and work your way up and not rush through things. I agree.
Yeah, and not to be so focused on the outcome too, because with like the popularity now of the 8,000ers and the list ticking, like, yeah, it's great to have a list, but I think sometimes that can cloud people's judgment. And I
Absolutely.
mean, I think like Shishkapangma is a prime example of that. And we can talk more about that if you're open to it. But I just was curious. One other question on Annapurna specifically is like, being as you have this more analytical mind, like how do you manage then or justify like dealing with the risk and the objective hazard that's present on a mountain like Annapurna?
I would say that I underestimated it, right? I did not understand until I had read all about Annapurna and I knew that it was quite objectively dangerous, but it wasn't until I was actually there seeing the rock fall, seeing the avalanches, seeing that they happen any old time of day. It's not just after a snowfall. You can't use your standard things, your standard ways to mitigate risk there. And at that point, I have to be honest, I had a lot of things going on personally back at home that were challenging. And I don't know, I felt really motivated to at least just try to get through it and just break it into small steps and be like,
Mhm.
okay, well, it seems pretty hard even to get to Camp One. To me, I mean, you're rappelling down this like rocky thing with like, rocks zinging by your head. And I thought, okay, well, this is a lot. Like, there wasn't anything like this on Everest. But I thought, well, let's just get to Camp One. And then when I got to Camp One, the next day to Camp Two was not super challenging. Then I felt more confident. And then getting to Camp Three is objectively the most dangerous, and there was an avalanche that kind of came by us and coated us with snow, but didn't take us out. And at that point, honestly, I was pretty ready to quit. But the Sherpa I was climbing with was like, this is Annapurna. Like, how did you not know? Like, this is just what Annapurna is. And at that point, it just made sense to keep going. He wanted to keep going, and it was like, all right, well, let's get to camp three then, and then we can like talk about what we're gonna do next. So I guess to answer your question, like some of it was ignorance. I think if I had really understood like what it would feel like having those rocks sing by my head and those the avalanches and all that stuff, I'm not sure if I would have done it.
Sometimes that's the best way, I guess,
Right.
is to not do too much research before and to take it one camp at a time. And
Yeah.
so how logistically, like how did you set up your climbs and how did you finance them?
Logistically, I mean, initially, as we talked about, I was working as an expedition doctor. Um, After several times where I didn't get an opportunity to summit, I realized that it made more sense to me if I was going to put in all that training and then take my only vacation time to try to climb, that I would rather pay for an expedition and not be the team physician. So I'd have a better opportunity to summit. Of course, when you say that, like if you go there as a physician, there's no other team physician. You still end up being the team doctor. But it was not an organized way. Like basically, I had a friend who liked one company. Which was a Nepali company called Expedition Base. And because she was going with them to Makalu, I said, yeah, okay, I'm ready to like not be the doctor and let's go on this trip. And when I did that, I liked that company a lot, but I met my friend Chris Warner and a group of Sherpas that I really enjoyed climbing with. And so then I honestly wanted to do what Chris Warner was doing next because he had been a guide for Russell Bryce. He was a mentor to me. And I think he just had a really safe way of climbing. And so I knew he maybe didn't know, but I knew he was trying to do all 14 peaks, even though he hadn't quite admitted that yet. And so I just thought, well, whatever he's doing next, I'm going to do next because I like climbing with him. And so then we were actually going to do Kachenjunga after Makalu, and then that just sort of fell apart. And so he was the one that at the last minute said, "Well, let's do Annapurna," and that's why I
Mhm.
didn't have quite as much time to research it as I might have.
Right.
So I guess so to answer your question, it was kind of like based on friends, connections. It wasn't like I sat down and like interviewed a bunch of companies and said like, how much are you going to charge me? How much are you going to charge me? I didn't do it like that. It just naturally, I went from climbing with Himex to expedition base, and then ended up switching to climbing with Mingma G after Annapurna, and then
Hmm.
stuck with Mingma G for the next 10 expeditions.
Wow.
I like Mingma G. I trust him. I trust the Sherpas he works with. He has the same group, usually always kind of working with him. And so, yeah, as far as financing it, I just honestly dipping into my savings, which was pretty terrifying. But I did try to get sponsors. I didn't try that hard. I tried to make a website and I tried to like pitch some kind of like medical companies because I thought like, okay, well, there's a lot of people that are climbing bigger, badder things than I am, but like I've got an artificial hip, right? And I've got bad eyesight and I wear like contacts when I'm climbing. So like maybe I could get sponsored by like a contact lens company or like maybe like Stryker implants who made my hip. I didn't have any success with any of that. So,
Well, your website is absolutely fantastic. And for folks that are listening that are interested in learning more about each one of the climbs, like I had the chance to go through some of them, and the details and the information you have on there, Tracee, is so helpful. And I
oh,
loved reading through it. Like I want to read all of it. You need to write a book.
oh,
Seriously.
thank
Because
you.
and the sponsors out there, it's not too late. You can still get involved, and there's still so many different stories to be told from your accomplishments. So, yeah, your website is fantastic. Thank you so much for all of your great storytelling and details on there.
Thank you. Yeah, it was really fun to make the website. I kind of did it a half-hearted attempt in the beginning, and then once I finished the project, I thought, I really want to create something for my friends and family and whoever else. And it was fun to make the website. So
So you did the Nepali 8,000ers, and then did you go to Pakistan next?
I did. So Annapurna was only my fourth one, my fourth summit, but that was when I sort of realized that I really wanted to try to do at least all the ones in Nepal. After that, after Annapurna, the next year I actually did Dhaulagiri and Kanchenjunga.
Wow.
And then it was the year after that that I went to Pakistan.
Okay. So
So
Dalangiri and Kanchenjunga, did you do them in the same season in the spring, or did you do a spring fall?
I did them in the same season in the spring. I actually
Okay.
tried Dhaulagiri the first time in 2021 after Annapurna.
Mm-hmm.
That was going to be my first attempt at like trying two in the same season. And I felt physically fine, but the conditions were challenging that year, and COVID was not completely gone. And so we ended up, a lot of people had COVID on Dhaulagiri, and
Mm.
and then I ended up kind of I had brought a lot of COVID tests. And so I was able to like test everyone at base camp, and we determined that like it was almost like 80% of the people had COVID. And then we
Whoa.
were able to get them all evacuated. They weren't super sick, but it just seems like Russian roulette. It's not smart to be at, 16,000 feet with COVID. Like you need to get down. So we were able to get everyone evacuated, and then there was a small group of us that didn't have COVID that wanted to keep climbing. But when we got up to Camp 3, the snow conditions, like the avalanche risk, it just felt way too dangerous. And it just didn't, it was a combination of like, most of the teams were gone and the
Hmm.
Abbey risk being too high. So I didn't summit. Nobody summited that year. And then I went back the next year and I felt confident that I could do Dhaulagiri and Kanchenjunga since I'd been pretty high on Dhaulagiri. So I did those both in the spring of the following year.
Wow. Yeah. Do you think, how does the spring compare to the fall in Nepal? Have you spent time both seasons?
I have. I would say that the spring, what do I want to say? The fall tends to have more snow and be wetter in my experience. I've mostly been on Manaslu in the fall, which is a wet mountain.
Hmm.
And then I would say this spring, it just feels like the weather's a little bit better, a little less snow, and the days are getting warmer, the days are getting longer. So
Yeah.
I enjoy the spring more, but it depends
Yeah.
on.
Okay, so then Pakistan, did you do all the Pakistani 8,000? Did you do them in one season or in a couple? You spread them
No,
out.
in 2 seasons.
Two
Yeah.
seasons. But
Two,
still, five or six in Pakistan.
five in Pakistan, two
Five.
seasons.
Still five in 2 seasons is really incredible. So,
It
how was your time in Pakistan?
it was good. I mean, the first one I did in Pakistan was Nanga Parbat, and Nanga Parbat is not an area that has as much tourism as like K2, and the it's a little more politically unstable, and so that was kind of a rough. It was rough to go there as my first Pakistan experience.
Yeah.
It's a hard mountain. I list Nanga Parbat in my mind as one of the top three of the hardest ones that I did, of the 14 peaks that I did. So,
Hmm.
Nanga Parbat was really hard. It was remote. Yeah, we don't have to get too much into that, but it had been the site of a massacre like 10 years before. And it's really challenging. So, yeah.
Yeah, it was an act of terrorism, right? Where a bunch of
Mhm.
climbers at base camp. What year was that again? 2008 or 9?
13, I think. Oh, man,
2013, really?
what I'm thinking. Yeah, I think so. I'm pretty sure because it was, I might be screwing that up, but I'm pretty sure
No,
we were there 10 years after because I remember then, like, on the day of the like 10 years, we were like, oh, should we be worried? Like, are people, if they're going to do something, are they going to do it on the 10-year anniversary? And
yeah, I remember feeling a similar unease because when I went to climb G2, we stayed at the hotel, the Marriott in Islamabad,
yeah,
that had been the site of a terrorist attack, a bombing targeting Westerners in 2008. And when my friends that had gone to ski there, I talked to like Hillary Nelson and Ingrid Backstrom, who had gone there to try to climb and ski it. They went, I think, shortly after that that bombing. And so it was
Yeah.
always in the back of my head when I was in Pakistan. Like it was hard, I think, for me to, I don't know, Pakistan's a hard place to travel for sure.
It's a hard place to travel. I would say like, yeah, traveling in Nanga Parbat, I was definitely very aware that I was a woman and I didn't even honestly, I didn't even enjoy walking around base camp by myself because I would try to walk just over to like pet the base camp dog or something. And then suddenly these men who were like very polite to me when I was at my base camp and they knew I was yeah, I wasn't working as the doctor, but everyone still was like coming to me with all their medical issues. There was, they were very respectful to me in that setting. But then as soon as I was by myself, like petting a dog, then they like came up and were like, "Where's your husband? What are you doing here?" And like it just didn't feel comfortable. I never went on a hike by myself there. Like anytime I just did an easy hike around base camp, I would always go with another person. And so I guess to say, and I will contrast that to K2, because I don't think Pakistan is entirely like that. So that was my
Hmm.
experience on Nanga Parbat. And then I went to K2 right after Nanga Parbat, and it was to me, maybe it was just like because Nanga Parbat had been so rough when like trekking into K2, I thought like, oh my gosh, like people are used to seeing people from other countries, and I didn't feel like people were like, I still was very aware that I was a woman, but like it didn't feel the same. It felt a lot safer, and I felt more at ease than I had on Nanga Parbat for sure.
Did you wear shorts
I
when you're
never
trekking?
did.
You never did.
No, did you?
After day three, well, we had a really hot weather wave when we were trekking in. On day three, I switched to shorts because I'm like, I just can't wear pants. I'm dying of heat. It was too hot. But I was very, self-conscious about it.
Right.
I'm like, I hope I'm not offending the guys, but at this point, they're we're in it and we were far enough away from the villages. Like it's a hard line as a woman there to know. I don't know, it's really confusing to know how to layer appropriately for heat and also not to like you want to respect the culture, but what is the line between respecting the culture and like internalizing I don't know, it was confusing to navigate for sure.
I agree. And I would have worn shorts, but I'm just not a person who wears shorts. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I had bought like really thin sun shirts, so that I was like wearing like a long sleeve shirt, but that it was, very thin.
Yeah, yeah. That's smart. Okay, so what were the hardest ones and what were your favorite ones out of the 14ers?
Yeah. I would say the hardest ones were Nanga Parbat, Annapurna, and Gasherbrum 1. Those were probably the hardest. My favorites were so my favorites were always based, I would say, more on the team than the mountain. Just
Hmm.
the experience that I had. So I loved Makalu. I had that, that we had a great team there that year, and it like we just all had a great time. And I like Makalu because it's a good mix of like um, what do I want to say? It's challenging, but it's not like over the top challenging. And then
Hmm.
I loved Manaslu, even though I've been there 4 times now. When I finally summited in 2023, we had a great team, and it was just one of the more fun experiences for sure. I have to say, like Shishapangma was probably the most meaningful experience for so many reasons, but those were probably, I mean, K2 I really enjoyed as well. So
Really?
I'm kind of all over the place there, but
Would you do K2? Would you do any of them again?
I would. I would. I would do Manaslu or Makalu. Like I would do some of the ones in Nepal again, but I would want to try without oxygen. And I don't know if I have the physical capability to do that. It never really worked. Like that was always in the back of my mind, something I wanted to try, but it just for a variety of reasons it doesn't work out well to try to do that if you're on a team with people that are all using oxygen. Like
Right. Yeah.
it really has to be your one focus.
Right. Yeah.
So so I would go back to a lot of the ones in Nepal again. I would never go back to Annapurna. Like when we summited that, like I really believe in my heart that if we had not summited when we summited, that that would have been it. Like I wouldn't have tried
Mm.
to do the 14 peaks and I wouldn't have gone
Wow.
back to that mountain because it was just so objectively dangerous that I wouldn't subject myself to that again.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I I would
Go
go back to
ahead.
Shishapangma and Cho Oyu if they weren't so expensive. Like there's a part of me that would really like an opportunity to ski. Like, and I know you skied Choyu, which was so awesome. And so, I would, the things that would interest me to go back would be an opportunity to ski something or to try something without oxygen.
That's so funny you bring that up because I was going to ask you, what are the most skiable 8,000-meter peaks? Obviously, Cho and Shish,
Shish.
um, Manaslu, those ones get skied somewhat regularly, like a handful of times. But what
Right.
other ones could you ski?
I think Dhaulagiri for sure, if you had the right snow year. I think especially if you went there in the fall when it had more snow than the spring, Dhaulagiri could be a decent ski. G2, you were you guys planning on skiing
We
G2?
were trying to ski, yeah, but we just
Okay.
got taken out by the diarrhea and the vomiting. It was like basically dysentery for my husband. It was just debilitating diarrhea. So
Oh yeah.
17 Imodium, 2 courses of antibiotics, and he still couldn't make it to the bathroom on time. So we
Gosh.
just could not kick it. And yeah, we had some time constraints with our team as well that like we probably could have figured out a way to overcome, but after being so sick for so long, we were kind of over it. So,
Totally.
yeah.
Totally. I think, so it was interesting. People were skiing G2 this last summer when I was there. It didn't look nice to me at all. But it was kind of a low snow year. I don't know. I wasn't inspired to want to ski G2 based on, I had thought I did. And then when I was actually on it, I was like, I'm not sure that I
It's
would
pretty
want
s-
to.
it's pretty steep.
It's pretty steep and it's like that ice fall to just get to Camp One is long, and
Mm-hmm.
you're not really skiing
Dangerous.
that. Like you can like skin in a few places, but it's a lot of like
Yeah.
hiking with your skis. I
Mm-hmm.
think G1, I'm really curious. There was guys from Jackson Hole that were skiing G1 and G2 this year, and I didn't get a big chance to talk to them. And I'm curious like what they skied on G1. There was parts of it that looked intriguing to me, but I wasn't there like with my like ski brain on
Yeah.
thinking that way. So I guess I would say, yeah, Dhaulagiri, Manaslu, G1 and G2.
Yeah. And so Shishkapangma, did you go twice?
I did, yeah.
Because the first time was the season the avalanche killed the other two women that were working on this same project. And so Gina, what was the other woman's name?
Anna.
Gina and Anna. And did you know them very well?
I knew Gina pretty well. So Gina and I had Gina used to climb with Mingma and Imagine Nepal up until I don't know, maybe her last year of trying to do them. And so we had been on probably like four 8,000-meter peaks together, at least. I'm just kind of thinking here. So I knew
Hmm.
her pretty well, and I really enjoyed climbing with her. I thought she was like she could always make me laugh, and just had a really good attitude. I had
Hmm.
never met Anna, and I did not know the Sherpas that they were climbing with.
Oh, I mean, Outside Magazine did a really good write-up about the accident. Did you have a chance to read it?
I did, I
Did you
did.
did you think it was accurate? The portrayal of what happened?
I do. I do. I mean, and I
Yeah.
actually well, I helped that reporter a lot. Like I was like, "Oh yeah, I'll do an interview." And then it ended up being a lot of like going through sharing my Strava data with her, sharing like timelines and things like that. So I think she did a good job, but I'm a little biased, right? Because she was using a lot of my
Well,
information. So to me,
well,
it was accurate.
thank you for contributing to that because I think it's so important in mountaineering that we are open and honest about the mistakes and about, accident debriefs and whatnot. Like the aviation industry does that in a really open, honest way. And it was refreshing. I'm sure it was very difficult for the families and friends of the deceased, of the young women, the women. But if people want to learn more about that, I would highly encourage them. I mean, we could spend a whole episode talking about just that,
We
I feel
could.
like, but I feel like the Outside Magazine did a really good job kind of debriefing and going through all the layers of like, there's so many different heuristics or like decision making traps I feel were at play there as well with like the two women going for the record of being the first American woman to climb the 8,000ers. And I can't help but think that that likely contributed to some of the fatalities, sadly.
Absolutely.
And I mean,
Yeah.
and I feel I would probably be the same in that moment. It's so hard now in our day and age to not let that stuff like that you want the shot, you want the track, you want to get it done, especially when you spend so much time and money. Like it's so hard to walk away
It's
when it's
so
not
hard to
right.
Exactly. It's so hard to walk away. And you're right. We could spend a whole episode talking about it, but I definitely, yeah, for sure that played a big role in, the
Yeah.
risks that were being taken and the decisions that were made that day.
I'll link that in the show notes. And yeah, I mean, I can't imagine I'm on the mountain. Was it hard to make the decision for you then to end your expedition?
Not at all.
No.
Um, because I mean, honestly, it wasn't hard at all because after I watched Anna and Mingmar get swept away by an avalanche, I mean, the first thing that went through my head was just that if an avalanche just happened, like more avalanches are going to happen, right? Like we know as backcountry enthusiasts that's the number one sign that it's not safe is if a big avalanche had just happened. So for me, there was the emotional thing that two young people full of life just died. And then I was just scared. Like I thought, I want to get out of here. Like more avalanches are going to happen. And at the point where I turned around, not everyone on our team was ready to turn around, but I was. And the Mama Sherpa is a Sherpa I've climbed with a lot. And he agreed. Like we both were like, we're getting out of here. And then after we were on our way back down, then we heard that the second avalanche had happened and
Mm.
taken Gina and Lama Sherpa out. And so just devastating. And there was no part of me that had any like if there was no I had no interest in continuing to climb obviously that day because of the conditions and everything that had happened, but I had already made a decision that like I was going home, like even if the team was going to try to climb in a week, like
Mm.
I just emotionally wasn't ready to do that. And then they ended
Yeah.
up China ended up saying the mountain was too unsafe and shutting it down. But for me, there was no thought of continuing at that time.
Well, thank you for sharing about that. And yeah, I send, my heart goes out to everyone that was affected by those tragedy. Like it was such a tragedy. It was so, so, so sad. So shifting gears, I just have two more quick questions before we wrap it up. So
Yeah,
favorite foods to eat on a big mountain at camp and then during hard efforts.
yeah, absolutely. Potatoes is my favorite base camp food. I just think I don't. To me, the potatoes in Nepal, even in Pakistan, not as much in Pakistan, are just delicious. Like the ones that are those mountain potatoes grown there, and I like French fries and hash browns any old way. I like dal, so I will eat. I like the lentil dishes, especially in Pakistan. I thought the
Mm.
lentil dishes there were delicious. And then on the mountain, my favorite things to eat are Pringles, ramen, and like those like little laughing cow cheeses
Oh,
that like
wow.
somehow I don't know if those have made it to your expeditions. Like it's more like the circle with the little triangle
Yeah,
soft cheeses. And those
totally.
things have been like not in the right temperature. And like every time I eat one, I think like, oh, am I gonna end up with a serious consequence from eating this? But those are really my favorite things. I eat a lot of shot blocks and goos and that kind of stuff, but the things I
Mhm.
enjoy eating are basically potatoes and cheese.
That's awesome. Yeah, I do a lot of gels up higher on the mountain, and then I love Pringles and haven't tried those cheeses. I'm gonna add that to our list for sure.
Yeah, they could survive just about any temperature, and I can never blame the cheese. I've gotten sick on a lot of mountains, but I don't think it was ever from the cheese.
Okay, that's good to know. I can't wait to add those. So, last question, what advice do you have for people who want to get into mountaineering?
I would say just do it. Which is easier said than done. I mean, I think if you can find like a local mountain club or signing up to go on an expedition, but in all seriousness, I think making a goal and then doing it, right? Like, even if it sounds scary, just to start with, like, okay, I'm gonna try Rainier. And if that
Mhm.
means that I don't have the skill set, so I'm gonna save more money and I'm gonna take a class ahead of the Rainier experience where I learn the crevasse rescue and then hopefully get to move on to summiting Rainier. I just think if you don't make the goal and you don't try to stick to it, like it's so hard to do it. So I would say like just pick something and then try to do it.
That's great advice. Book the trip, make that payment, wire that money. It's so
Yep.
scary, but you just have to commit. Tracee, thank you so much for chatting with me today. I would love to keep the conversation going. I'm so inspired by you, and huge congratulations on your accomplishment. First American woman, fourth American ever to climb all of the 14 of the world's highest peaks. And yes, would love to keep in touch.
Awesome. I would love to keep in touch too. We'll have to touch base about some skiing projects.
Absolutely. I hope to meet in real life, and thank you so much for your time today.